Welcome to That's So Clutch, an automotive podcast that bridges the gap between car industry experts and those who are not. Hey everyone, welcome back to That's So Clutch. I'm your host, Eleni Ferreira, and today we have Dan Azel, Finance Manager at Mercedes-Benz of Austin. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm very glad to be here.
So, let me get a little bit into your background here because it's interesting. Despite your background in professional golf, you said, for over 20 years you have been in almost every position in the automotive industry, from sales to finance to even general manager at one point. You were finance director for the third highest rated finance department in the nation through Toyota. Yeah. And you have broken every individual finance record within the Continental Automotive Group. So you know numbers, basically.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I've been around.
So with all that, you have been married to your wife for 21 years and have 2 children. We love a family man.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's give the people what they want. Let's talk a little finance here. From a financial standpoint, what factors should someone consider when deciding buying a new car or a used car?
Well, I think that market conditions are always going to be kind of the biggest factor when you're looking at value for what you're buying. When you're in constraint situations like we've been in the last couple of years with new cars, obviously used car pricing has increased dramatically. Yeah. But the availability of the car you want may only find in the used car market. So there's a balance there that you have to kind of approach. You always want to make sure that you're getting what you want, but it's still a very fair deal to you. And I think that that's where people are kind of experiencing where finance kind of comes in a lot of times is my job is to help make that affordable for people. If you're buying a used car that maybe 3 years ago was a little bit less money, but because of market constraints is a little higher now, it's up to the finance manager to figure out a way to make that work for your payments. So
how do you know if you're getting like a bad deal on a car?
There is no bad deal if it's what you want. I mean, ultimately, if it's what you want to drive, you're not buying a payment, right? You're not buying a price, you're buying a car. Yeah. And if you're in love with that vehicle and you know that you're going to treat it right and you know you're going to keep it for a long time, that value exists over a time period. It's not a today price. It's what is it going to give you over the next few years. And if you walk out to your garage and you're happy with what you have, you made the right choice.
Then it's worth everything. Yeah.
Right.
So are there any hidden costs or fees when purchasing a car that we should be aware of?
No hidden costs. Actually, in today's world, everything is full disclosure. I know car business has a past history, especially with finance managers and different things that, there was all these things that were packed in. Yeah. But in today's world with full disclosure and consumer protection laws and what's happening out there, everything is very much upfront. Everything is disclosed to the client. I mean, to the point where even my videos, every transaction that's done is videotaped. We can play back. We can see everything that took place during it, what was said, what was promised.
It's documented.
So there's really an open book, and it's very transparent. And the amazing part is that clients really seem to gravitate towards that. They understand that we're not there to kind of pull any wool over anybody's eyes. This is what it is. Yeah. And we're going to do the best to make this investment good for you. So I think it works out well for people. Yeah.
So what's the typical interest rates for car loans?
That's a tough one. Well, it's funny. If you would have asked me beginning of last year, we were seeing things in the 3s and the 4s, really low. And, obviously the market's changed. The Fed's gone up month after month after month. Everybody kind of heard it happening. And nowadays, honestly, from the top tier credits, we're seeing, the 6s and the 7s. Yeah. The bottom end of credit has never really changed. It's always into that 20-24%. It can get pretty rough. Yeah. And everything in between. But it's just that those subvented rates that we got so accustomed to and so used to for so long have kind of gone by the wayside. Right now, the manufacturers aren't incentivized to put incentivized rates out because they don't have the new product to sell. Yeah. So you're just not seeing it the way you used to. Is there going to be a turn or an uptick? Probably at some point in time as inventory levels grow and as people have the inventory to sell, you'll start seeing that incentivized program start coming back. But for right now, we're more in an inventory crunch. So you've seen rates kind of come out. And in all honesty, 6, 7, 8%, those were really good rates 20 years ago, and now we're just kind of back to that and things have kind of stabilized a little bit. So I think you'll see it there for a while and they might trickle down a bit, but honestly, I think we're kind of the new norm. This is where we're at. So
let's say you do have like a pretty bad credit score and you're in the, you said like 20s for the interest rates.
Could be.
How can you negotiate for a lower rate?
Well, you know, as a finance manager, it's one of those conversations that you have to have with clients a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to go out there with the credit and you're going to have that explanation with people. And there becomes an issue of timing. What's most important right now? Is it more important to get into a vehicle today?
Yeah.
Or is it more important to maybe let's fix a couple things? Let's give it 90 days and let's revisit this and maybe we can get something a little bit better for you and save you a lot of money. Again, it's kind of goes back to your earlier question, right? Is a bad price for a car? Is there a bad interest rate for a car? It really depends on you and your budget and what you need.
Yeah.
If the need is there and I have to have a car and that's the situation, it's not really a negotiation as much as it's trying to find something that works for you, right? At the end of the day, budget matters.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with that situation, it's just a matter of, is this the right decision for the budget that you have?
Yeah.
You know?
So why do credit scores differ per client, even though the credit bureau they pulled from was the same?
Right. So this is more interesting, and this is a conversation that I probably have daily. Especially with new kind of awareness of credit karmas and apps and different things that people have, and they're seeing their credit scores. What people aren't made aware of a lot of times is that everybody knows there's 3 bureaus, or most everybody knows, right? You've got Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and all 3 of these bureaus have credit scores that are available to you. Most people understand that. What most people don't know or are unaware of is that within those bureaus, you have 30, 40 different scoring models. And those models are based on the type of credit that you're using. Now, most of the time, Karma, for instance, is running a review on revolving lines of credit, meaning credit card purchases, things like that. And it takes that as a heavily weighted item within your credit score, and it's basically putting that item as the top. So somebody may be a 781 on TransUnion on their revolving credit line, but they've had a bad mortgage payment, and their mortgage model will look significantly lower, or vice versa. An auto model might be a completely different score because they're looking at auto history as the more important thing. So based on what model you're pulling, that credit score will vary even within each individual bureau, which is a little new to most people because they'll show me all the time, no, my credit score is this. And
is it by 1 point or is it like a couple?
That's significant. Really? I mean, I've seen as much as, 30, 40, 50 point differences based on what model they're using. So it can be very significant.
Yeah.
And again, that late pay on the auto 2 years ago may not matter a lot to somebody's revolving line of credit, but it means a lot to their auto scoring model. And that's where that kind of comes in. So, yeah.
Have you ever had like a fraudulent transaction? Like maybe someone pretending they weren't?
Yeah. So, obviously in 20 plus years, you see a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And that's our job. As a finance manager, we're the legal backstop of the dealership. And that's our most important job, right? Is that we are the ones that are on the line for, did you verify identity? Did you make sure this wasn't fraudulent?
Yeah.
Did you double check the checks and where it came from and the banking institutions? Is this money there? Is this the right person signing? Is this stolen credit? Is the red flags there? Has the OFAC been checked? So all of those things, right? Because in any world, right, that's the things that can kill a dealership, right? Is those lawsuits and those legal aspects that can come up. No car deal is worth it, right? And that was something that was taught to me a long time ago, especially when I took this job, is that no one car deal is worth the risk.
So what do you do in those situations when someone pretends to be someone they're not?
Yeah. So recently just had kind of one of these situations come up. We actually had a client call in. They were posing as a dentist that was local.
Oh.
They happened to be in California on a business trip. They were looking to purchase a vehicle for their husband locally as a birthday present. So obviously did the ID check, verified. We did the background check, verified, did the OFAC, came up with some questions that needed to be answered. There's 4 questions on the credit. We sent it over. The customer answered them within, I would say like almost 30 seconds. All the answers came back correct.
Wow.
So by all accounts, this was a completely legitimate transaction. It just was a little odd that it was out of state.
Yeah.
We moved forward with the deal cautiously, and ultimately we got a call about a week after finishing this deal that the real client's credit had been run and got notified that, hey, I didn't buy a car. What's going on? And obviously, red flags are going up everywhere. We're double checking. We've done all the basis. We did our background and our history, discovered that it obviously was fraud. The person who took delivery actually took the car and put it on Toro. And the car was Toro's a rental service. They actually listed the car on there. Car was recovered. The client was actually pulled over with a stolen vehicle. We recovered the car. But
oh my gosh,
this is a situation where this person not only had stolen this person's credit, but had actually studied their credit report.
Yeah.
And knew the answers immediately, had the
scary.
ID that actually passed the fraud. So, I mean, this was obviously a well-constructed deal.
Do you think that's happening more because of like the advancements in technology?
Yeah, I absolutely think that there's a lot out there, and obviously your information is so accessible in so many ways, and we have to put it out there for so many different things to just go through our daily lives that we're all subject to exposure. I mean, I would recommend to everybody, take the time, get a LifeLock, get something on your credit, something that blocks it, something that signals to you if your credit's being ran. It's just a good protection for yourself. It's a good secondary protection. We can do everything right, and it still will come up. And that's the scenario that it did. Luckily, we got our car back, and the client has been taken care of.
Yeah.
But these things happen, and it's important that yes, we went through our steps, but it's good for people to know.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's so scary. Oh my gosh. So, trailing back a little bit just into the brand Mercedes, how does the cost of ownership for Mercedes-Benz compare to other luxury car brands in terms of like maintenance or insurance or depreciation?
Well, obviously with any high-end brand, the part or the cost of ownership, I think, falls more into the technical side of what's done. In Mercedes, for instance, we are doing a service once a year, where in a lot of brands, you're doing service twice a year.
Yeah.
So when you average out the price of the two services versus one, they're far more similar than they would be each individual service if you're comparing them. The second part of that, and the part that really isn't discussed, I think, nearly enough, and this is from a different part of my background, is what the technicians get paid and the amount of training and cost that goes into getting them to that level.
Yeah.
And therefore, that cost is obviously going to be higher when you go into that particular institution. So if we're spending, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on a tech to get them technically trained to be at a level to work on this car, that cost has to be absorbed somewhere.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it ends up ultimately getting passed on to the customer, because that is how you obviously stay in business. To have this technician work on your car, it takes this much money to get them to that point. And those are just realities of the situation. So yes, are we a little bit higher? Yes, but we can offset it with the amount that you need. If you're only going once a year, it certainly does help you.
Well, and they're such complex vehicles. So
Absolutely.
It's like you're kind of paying for what you're buying.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So how can I minimize the depreciation of my car? If I were to own a Mercedes, how do you minimize that?
Well, there's a couple things. Obviously, you can maintain your car, which is obviously one of the most important things, right? Just like with any vehicle, you're keeping it clean, dent-free. You have both keys. You don't have cracked windshields. You don't have all these things, right? Obviously, these play into different things that I talk about in my office. But at the same time, right, a lot of times when you're talking with the high-end side, the best way to mitigate depreciation is to have somebody else take the risk on for them. And when I say that, I basically mean leasing. The reality of the situation is that is exactly what leasing is, right? You're having somebody else guarantee you a future value for a depreciated asset. Why not? If it's worth more at the end, I'll sell it and make money. If it's worth less, here's the keys. It's your problem, not mine. If you're going to mitigate risk, that's the easiest way to do it,
So with Mercedes specifically, you'd say it'd be better to lease, or just with any vehicle?
Yeah. Now, in normal times, right? When I say that, I mean normal inventory levels, everything's going on. We're leasing about 50 to 60% of our new cars.
Really?
Yeah. Well, the thing you're buying in Mercedes, right, beyond a great car, right? You're buying the best of the best technology, the best features, the best everything, right? And that's why it is the best of the best, right? The problem is that 3 years later, right, you're no longer holding that image on a 3-year-old car. So a lot of our clients that want that, right, that want that top of the line, best things, everything that came out, right, they want a new car every couple of years. And the reality is there's no better way to approach it than to lease and just be into that cycle And especially with Mercedes, who, you have a 6-month, a lot of times payment waiver at the end. So you're waiving 6 months of payments to get into a car earlier. So now you're moving into every 2.5 years, you're getting the brand new car.
Wow.
And as long as you've accepted that I'm okay with having a car payment, that's great. Give me a new car every 3 years. My payment stays roughly the same. I'm just bouncing into new cars. Fantastic.
I really thought it'd be the opposite with Mercedes. I expected other car brands, maybe like Subaru or Honda or Hyundai to have high leasings, but not Mercedes. That's crazy.
Yeah, actually, it would be the opposite on most of the brands that you just mentioned. That's
the people
that want long-term loanership. I mean, when you think Toyota, right? You think, quality, long-term, never going to break. Not that you don't think that with Mercedes, you just think the best, right? And again, those clients want the best
of the best.
And they always want the best. And 3 years later, they're going to want the best again. And it works more.
But let's go back into this a little bit. Should I put more down? And how would that affect my rate if I were to buy?
Yeah. So assuming that all things being equal about the loan, right? For instance, I'm going to get approved whether I put a little down or a lot down, right? The approval is not an issue, right?
Yeah.
Assuming that that's the case, then the question is, what are you doing with down payment? And ultimately, you're buying a payment, right? And in a lot of ways, cash is king in society. I've always kind of lived by that motto, right? So if I'm putting all my money into an auto loan, I'm now cash poor. I may have a low payment, but I don't have the cash to cover any incidents that might happen elsewhere. Yeah. So all things being equal, I would tell somebody to put as little down as you can, right? And keep your payments the same. Now, that being said, if the structure changes and it's affecting my interest rate or those kind of things, that's a different conversation. The awareness comes in with things like a gap insurance or something like that, where I'm worried about quick depreciation on my car. That's where cash down will help with that scenario so that you don't have that gap take place. So there's benefits to both. Obviously, every situation is a little different. I'm answering on a broad scale, but assuming that it's not affecting my rates or my loan structure, I would say keep your money. Honestly, buying a payment down doesn't benefit anybody. You lose your cash and you could just put that money in a bank and make the extra payment with it. So I never understood it. So yeah.
So speaking of loans, what do banks look for when making a decision about a customer's loan?
Right. So it was funny. I was a finance manager for about 3 weeks, right? I'm very new to the business, and this is going back 20 years ago. Yeah. And one of my sales managers came up and he said, "It's ACEs," and I said, What's ACEs? That doesn't make sense. ACEs. And I was like, if you have a hand in poker, you have aces, and 4 aces is great. And I said, yeah, but he's like, ACEs stands for ability to pay, credit, equity, and stability, right? It spells out ACEs. And he says, if I have 2 of the 4 of those, I have a car deal, and you can make that deal, right? So that's just like a poker hand, right? So if you got a pair of aces, you're going to play. Yeah. And so again, when you ask the question, what makes up the structure of a deal? It's those 4 items, right? Ability to pay. Do I have enough income to support the car payment? Right? Credit. Is my credit score at a point where I can get financed? Equity. Am I in a good structure that the banks will buy? And stability. Have I had my job for a long time? Have I lived in a place for a long time? Am I going anywhere? Am I a high risk to the bank? Yeah. Right. So when you're looking at auto loans, right, from a finance manager, it's ACEs. It's easy to remember, and I think most finance guys, if they've never heard that, it really kind of puts a light on. Yes, these are the things I'm looking for, and I'm trying to find an ace. So it's an easy way to think.
I bet that's such a fun deal when in the office.
Yeah, when you first get it, and it's what's the good, right? And that's part of the job, right? When you have that problem customer and you're trying to find a way to go. In a lot of ways, the part of my job that people don't see is the selling of the loan to the bank, right? I'm calling the bank and I'm trying to justify why they should loan you money. And I'm looking for everything that's good and positive about your situation to get that loan for you and get you the best loan I can. So all of those things are so important to me to know. And that's why conversations and interviews take place, because that might be the one thing I need that's going to put me over the hump and get my loan done. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So can you explain the concept of negative equity?
Yeah. So basically what happens with negative equity is you're in a situation where your car's value is simply not worth the loan value that's remaining on your car. So for instance, you still owe the bank $25,000, but your car's really worth $20,000. You're in a negative equity situation of $5,000. So that comes twofold, right? When I trade that car in, that negative equity, that balance is going to be rolled into the loan amount, increasing the overall loan value. So if I'm buying a car for, say, MSRP and I'm putting $5,000 on top of it, now I'm in a negative equity situation on my new car. That's where a product like GAP, which is Guaranteed Auto Protection, right? That's the actual acronym for it. That's where a product like that will come into play. That's a product that ensures that the value of the loan will be paid off in the instance of a total loss. So for instance, I get in a wreck, my car, I owe 70, my car's worth 50, now there's a $20,000 balance in loan. That's where GAP steps in and takes care of that difference. So that's why that's an important product to a lot of people that are in a negative equity.
So how can you avoid getting into negative equity?
A couple different things that you can do. Obviously, you could put a bunch of money down, but I answered earlier that I don't believe in that motto, right? One of the easiest things that I think is something that most people can do is if you can afford to do a shorter term finance, that's going to take a lot of that away, right? So obviously, everybody kind of walks in with this, especially nowadays, this 72-month or 84-month mindset. And the problem is that those payments are, yes, smaller, but they're also paying a lot less to principal. And your car's depreciating at the same rate on a 72-month loan as it is on a 36-month loan. So if you can afford to go to a shorter term, that's the first and easiest way to help with negative equity, is that the shorter the term, the more of your payment is going to principal every time. And you're paying that loan down quickly. Some people can't afford to do that, and I can appreciate that. So I would certainly say if I'm on a 72-month loan, I always think of the rule of 50. If you can round up to the nearest 50, say your payment is $760, if you can afford $800 a month, pay $800 a month. That little bit of extra is going to principal every month. Now, in the early part of a loan, the way the simple interest loan works, the vast majority of your interest is paid up front. Well, the vast majority of your depreciation happens up front. So if you can offset that with slightly more payments that are going to principal, you're kind of keeping those curves moving down at the same rate. And that's one way you can avoid it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? And it doesn't have to be automotive related.
Ooh, one thing to tell my younger self. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I tell myself to change anything. I don't think there's anything I've done in my career that, or my life in general, that I would change. And
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, I look at myself right now and I have a great job. I work for a great company. I have a wonderful wife, 2 great kids. I don't think I did too many things wrong. I mean, honestly, I would probably tell myself, work out a little bit more and lose some weight. You know what I mean? Maybe my health would be a little bit better at the end of the day. Maybe I wouldn't have a bad back and stuff like that. But I mean, honestly, the decisions that I've made along the way, if I changed one, I might not have exactly what I have right now. And I really like what I have right now. My life went well. I mean, I don't have too many complaints. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. This was so fun. Great. I really enjoyed this episode.
Absolutely.
Learned a lot more about finance. I'm not so much scared of them anymore.
That's good.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed this episode of That's So Clutch. And as always, if you have any questions about the automotive industry, please feel free to leave them down below and maybe we'll feature them in the next video. Bye.